this will be a regular slot. You met Jaqui Lane, Australian businesswoman, publisher, writer, and a Kiwi in actual fact, left New Zealand, one of the first of the brain drain, I have to say. Well, it was in the brain drain, must have been mid-late 80s, actually, Jack went from New Zealand to Australia. Sydney built a publishing empire, you'd have to say, which she still has, as she reminded me the last time we talked. And she has been extraordinarily well politically connected over the years as well, and we're extraordinarily privileged to have her and her insight. A New Zealand perspective of Australia, if you like. And what we'll do is look at what's happened in Australia from a New Zealand perspective, given the closeness of our countries, but also given the fact that so many New Zealanders are there, more according to these latest stats I see from the Department of Statistics for the year ended November of last year. But we'll be getting her perspective on matters of the day, and particularly those that are relevant to New Zealand. And boy, there's one piece of news that happened that was particularly relevant to New Zealand, but we'll talk about that with her later on. She joins us now. Welcome to the show, Jaqui. Lovely to have you on.
Pleasure to be here, Michael. Happy New Year.
To you too. Hey, listen, before we go on about anything else, the big story from a New Zealand perspective, I guess, of Australia was that they're stealing another Kiwi coach to go and coach their hapless Wallabies.
Oh, how unusual. It's a real shame, actually, I think, that, and I know a few people in the rugby fraternity, is that, great for talented people around the world, but really is something seriously wrong with Australian rugby if it can't really develop a pipeline of potentially talented coaches at all levels so that they've got several to pick from for their own team.
Yeah, and the last two Kiwi coaches, which is Robbie Deans and then, I'm trying to remember. He got sacked.
David. Yes, he got sacked.
But he hadn't done anything wrong, and he was seeming, and they had seemed to. There was a sort of an anti-New Zealand flavour that was permeating in some rugby circles in Australia, making exactly the point that you've made, that we've got the talent. And now, Joe Schmidt, I can't imagine there'll be a universal acceptance in rugby circles across there.
Look, I think that, and as I said earlier, I think the real issue is a frustration that, we're not developing our own coaches here, and that we are constantly feeling the need to look outside. Now, it's an international world, and we're all kind of big people, and, soccer, football has coaches, that are international. But I think that it's yet another example of the ARU really not getting its act together. And so I think the person is not the issue. I think that it's more the structural thing around, well, why the hell are we not growing our own?
Australia did very badly at the World Cup. We all know that. We all sort of developed quite a healthy schadenfreude about the failure of the Wallabies last year. And Eddie Jones in particular, who's probably not the favourite coach of New Zealand, actually anywhere just at the moment, apparently, certainly not in Australia. But I'm just thinking, we know, and we used to have a very good rivalry with Australia in the 90s and the sort of noughties. It was our primary opponent, really, in many ways, even more so than the Springboks. The difference, I guess, though, Jack, is that Australia's got a very good soccer team. Well, we don't have one. They've got a very good rugby league system and competition, and an Australian rugby league team. They've got Aussie rules. Rugby is fighting for a recognition there that it receives automatically here. So if it's not internationally successful, that must hurt the game throughout the entire country, does it?
Well, yeah, look, I think that's a really interesting comment. So rugby union here has significant competition. And so that makes it harder, for it to secure funding, support and TV rights and all the rest of it. And it's still really regarded, oddly, as a private schoolboy's little exercise. So there's always been this undercurrent that it's for a particular segment of the community, whereas League has a much more kind of working class kind of background. So whilst it's important to us who love rugby in New Zealand and obviously here in Australia, it's a bit of a side story really, and Australians love a winner, so they're always going to focus on who's winning and who's, and not the losers, quite frankly.
Actually, that leads me automatically, sorry I didn't tell you that this has come out, but you've got the Australian Tennis Open there at the moment, which is played in Melbourne. Listen, one of the things that always stuns me about the Tennis Open in Australia is that the temperatures on court get to the point where I would have expected somebody would die, let alone play tennis in it. But they always finish games at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Is that because of the temperature during the day?
I'm not quite sure. I think it's not so much because of the temperature, because now I think in the arena they can close it. It was, I think, originally started to sort of keep the rain out, but they have the ability, I think on centre court certainly, to close the roof. I think that you can't predict how long games are going to go. So if you're going to a massive 5-set game and it takes 5 hours, the next game scheduled just starts when it starts. So I think the one overnight started at 11 o'clock because that's when it was scheduled, and you can't delay it to the next day because you've got another schedule of games. And I heard the winner, I can't even remember who it was, on the radio this morning saying, well, thanks everybody for hanging around till 3 a.m. because if it was me, I would have gone at about 1. He
played, it was Zverev, I think, wasn't it? Isn't he the Russian that became a Canadian? I think that's the way it goes, but anyhow. All right. Listen, the last time we talked last year, obviously, we were talking and you gave us a really good insight into the voice referendum. And the voice referendum, of course, that was overwhelmingly lost, but was seeking to give a constitutional status to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in very much the same way or a similar way to the Treaty of Waitangi in this country. It was lost. I don't think there was one state apart from ACT, was it, Canberra, that actually voted for it? And the suggestion was that it really screwed and skewed Anthony Albanese as Prime Minister and the Labor government in general last year. Has that dissipated that particular view? What's happened since in terms of public perception of the Australian Prime Minister and government?
Okay, so the referendum was a disaster for the Labor Party, and they never really came back from it. And then what happened towards the end of the year is that we, in all our wisdom, our governments have been permanently detaining a number of refugees, and it was taken to court, and the High Court demanded that they be released because they were on permanent detention and had never any hope of being released from permanent detention, and the High Court, I think quite rightly, said that's wrong, you need to release them all. So within a day, they released 140 of these refugees who had been denied, visas or whatever to be in the community, and within 2 weeks, several of them had been arrested for
quite serious offences.
So
including rape.
Including rape and theft and a number of other things. And not all of them, but by any stretch, but that ended up being another disaster for the Labor Party because everyone quite rightly said, how come you weren't prepared for this eventuality? Because the initial thing from Labor was, well, we have to do what the High Court says, separation of, powers and stuff. But, everyone went back, well, hang on a minute, guys, surely you would have done some scenario planning about the fact that potentially this would have happened. The answer was no, they hadn't. So they were very much flat-footed on the response to that. And, of course, every time one of those people got arrested or whatever, it was just another reminder of the seeming incapacity of the government to deliver on action rather than words. So they got to the end of the year where really some serious questions are now being asked about their capacity to actually govern and to implement any number of things that they said they would. And so we've had the Christmas break here, and so all of the media now is around, okay, what's going to happen with the reset in the new year?
Well, can I also talk about the other thing that I've noticed in Australia, and perhaps I'm just too much of a bloody news nerd, and that is how much the Palestinian issue and the sort of Hamas-Israel war has sort of muddied the waters in Australian politics. It's stunning the amount of coverage it gets in comparison to New Zealand. Why is there such a strong flavour of disruption, dissension, disagreement, and quite nasty about it too, between Jewish folk and Palestinian sympathisers in Australia in particular?
Well, I think we have a very large Jewish population. I mean, compared to New Zealand. And from post-war migrants and obviously future generations. People from different religious faiths are represented in our politics at all levels. And so you're getting this divide, I guess, but, across parties. It's not a party thing. It's, people are very active in prosecuting their case. Every week, every Saturday in Sydney, I think there has been pro-Palestinian rallies in the centre of the city. So there's very vocal and very active communities on both sides of this. And then you have a group of people in the community, probably like me, who just appalled at the humanitarian disaster, whatever way you look at it.